Welcome to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free, 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
Yes, indeed. We welcome you to the Monday edition of Catholic Answers Live, coming to you from San Diego and really all over the all over the world. I'm Tom Price. I'm filling in for Patrick Coffin today. I'm here at the studios of EWTN, beautiful Birmingham, Alabama. Catholic Answers, of course, based in San Diego. We're going to go to the phones in just a moment, and it's going to be a very important program. In fact, it's so important we're going to dedicate 2 hours to this. The topic today: pro-life answers to pro-choice questions. So if you consider yourself a pro-choice person, if that is where you're coming from, and you have a question about where we are coming from, we want to hear from you. And the phone number is 1-888-318-7884, 1-888-31-TRUTH. That is the toll-free number that you can call. In our second hour, we're going to have Catholic Answers' own Trent Horn in the studio to answer questions. In this hour, it's going to be Stephanie Gray checking in from Toronto. Hey, Stephanie.
Hello, Tom. Thanks for having me on the program.
We are delighted to have you, and you have been there, haven't you? I know that you're the talk that you give. You call yourself someone who has been on the other side. Tell us a little about where you're at right now and where you've been.
Well, certainly I've engaged a lot of people, I wouldn't say necessarily on the other side, but engaged a lot of people who are on the other side, having done a lot of debates with abortion advocates, including abortionists themselves. And one of the things that I do when I do formal debates is I invite my opponents to have coffee before we do that formal kind of discussion in front of a crowd. And so I've had really a unique opportunity to enter into a discussion over coffee with the very individuals who not only promote the killing of children, but who actually commit the act of killing children. And so it has given me, I think you could say, unique insights into what arguments the other side is making, what motivates them to do this horrible thing, and what kind of messages we need to communicate in response to really win people over to the pro-life perspective.
Sure. Again, here we're talking with Stephanie Gray on Catholic Answers Live, and we are going to be taking your calls if you find yourself on the pro-choice side of things. Stephanie, I certainly didn't mean to imply that you had pro-choice in your own background, but certainly you have heard a lot of arguments coming from that side. Can you give me a couple of them and how you deal with those?
Sure, absolutely. Well, a lot of what I do with the Canadian Centre for Bioethical Reform is engaging people on the topic of abortion. We routinely are outside of high schools, at university campuses, asking students, what do you think about abortion? And what I most often hear is people say, well, in some circumstances, I think it's acceptable. So then I will often say, well, what circumstances? And I hear a lot people saying, well, what if a girl is raped? Shouldn't that justify abortion? And I think it's important as the pro-lifer there to really ensure the other person feels heard. And what we can agree with that individual on is that rape is horrible, that it is a human rights violation, that it is an injustice.
Yes.
And then from there, we need to make the point that what makes it an injustice is that an innocent human being, in that case the woman, is violated. So then the question is, what does abortion do? Because if it involves an injustice being inflicted upon another innocent human being, as we know to be the case, then what we have to ask ourselves, is it fair to inflict an injustice on an innocent child because an injustice has been inflicted upon her innocent mother? And we certainly need to help rape victims, but we need to understand that an abortion isn't going to unrape the rape victim. It's just going to harm another innocent human being. So I certainly hear that a lot.
You've spoken with groups, individuals, really all over the world. As I look at your bio, I see that you've spoken in the UK, in Latvia.
Yes,
certainly,
with an interpreter. I don't speak Latvian.
and even Costa Rica. As you travel around, are these questions kind of universal, or do you hear certain questions in certain countries?
Tom, great question, and they really are universal. I have not found much of a difference in all the different audiences that I've spoken to. There's that common theme that if life is going to be difficult, if the mother is going to face hardship, if maybe she can't afford the child, or there's going to be some degree of suffering, whether physical or emotional, financial, that shouldn't abortion be allowed. I've heard that in all the different countries and continents that I've been to. And what we try to get across to people is that we don't object, or we don't deny that difficult life circumstances exist. We agree that it would be difficult to be pregnant and poor, difficult to be pregnant and have no support, difficult to be pregnant from, let's say, something like sexual assault. But our point simply is that we need to alleviate the difficult circumstances without eliminating the innocent child. And so what we've aimed to do in the many places that I've gone to is really show the facts for how life begins at fertilization, and therefore with the preborn we're dealing with a human being, and therefore talk about how with the facts of the abortion procedure it's an act of violence which kills those human beings, and therefore come to the conclusion that abortion would be as wrong as killing a 2-year-old or 5-year-old would be wrong.
Our speaker here today, Stephanie Gray, and we are taking we're taking your pro-choice questions. If you believe that in your heart of hearts you are pro-choice, you are all about the rights of the woman at all costs, we would like to hear from you, because there may be something that Stephanie hasn't tackled yet. Maybe she hasn't heard your side of the story. Give us a call at 1-888-318-7884. Let me give you that again. It's a toll-free. It won't cost you a penny. 1-888-318-7884. Again, it's Catholic Answers Live and the Monday edition of Catholic Answers Live. Tom Price here asking the questions, and there is one question that has come to me, and that is, doggone it, I just had it. And it was a great question. It just slipped out of my head for just a second, but it will come back.
Well, if I could jump in there, another question that I'm often asked is, what about if the woman's life is in danger? And I think, again, in that situation, we can find common ground and acknowledge that that's a crisis, that's a dilemma. But the whole reason it's a dilemma is only if the preborn are human. Because in that situation, then we realize, okay, we have a situation where we have 2 human lives on the line, that of the baby and that of the mother. And in those difficult circumstances, which are rare but can occur, such as the case of, a tubal and ectopic pregnancy, it is always wrong to do an abortion, which is directly and intentionally ending the life of the child. You may not do evil, such as that act, to bring about a good. However, saying that you can't do an abortion doesn't mean that there aren't ways of intervening which aren't abortion. So, for example, in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, you can do a procedure called a salpingectomy, which is removing the section of the fallopian tube that, understandably, the baby is in. But the reason the tube is being removed is that if it's left alone, it will burst, causing the death of not only the child, but possibly the mother as well. So what matters in these scenarios is that we never commit an action which targets the baby's body, but rather we commit an action that addresses the pathological condition that is within the mother, whether it's, an expanding fallopian tube, whether it's a cancerous uterus, that kind of thing. The action addresses the pathology, and the intention is to try to save both lives.
Very good. You're listening to Catholic Answers Live. We are taking your questions, your pro-choice questions. Perhaps you find that you personally feel that you are pro-choice. We'd like to hear from you today. 1-888-318-7884. Stephanie Gray is with us, and thank you for bailing me out. I did remember the question I was going to ask you,
Stephanie. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, that deals with adoption, which we don't hear, in my opinion, we don't hear enough about it. Many women feel that they're either going to be a mom for the rest of their lives, or they're going to be, they're going to have this abortion. The question of adoption doesn't come up very often these days. Can you tell me why? Do you have any insight on that?
Yes, I do. Tragically, it doesn't. You're correct in that analysis. And I think it's because we are a selfish culture rather than selfless. Adoption is hard. Because adoption says at some point in these 9 months, I'm going to fall in love with this child. And then I'm going to go through painful hours of birth for this child. And at the end of all of that, when she's placed in my arms, I'm going to then place her into the arms of someone else who I think can give her a better future than I can. And that is hard. And because that's hard, a lot of people have the idea, if I can't have this child, no one can. I'm going to get rid of her before I feel her kick, before I feel that she's really within me, before I've bonded to her. And that's what abortion is. So what we really need to do is challenge the culture to look long term and to be more other focused and acknowledge it's going to be difficult, but yet there will be a support network of people to walk with you through the difficult process of adoption, as well as understanding that nowadays adoption is very different from, say, several decades ago when it was often very closed. Whereas now you can often stay in touch with the adoptive family, sometimes be very involved, even visit the child. I think it's important that we always be asking ourselves, what is in the best interest of the other? Because at its core, that's what love is. Love is wanting the other's good. And so in this situation, it's a matter of saying, what is the other's good? What is the good for this preborn child? But not denying that it's going to be hard. It's going to be extremely hard. And, a lot of times we don't want to make hard choices because they hurt. And yet, if we look at all the people who inspire us, the people who inspire us are often people who faced hardship and suffering, and yet they do the right thing. Whether it's Mahatma Gandhi, whether it's Dr. King, whether it's Mother Teresa, or whether it's Jesus Christ himself, these are people who laid down their lives for the other's good.
We see it all the time. Father Richard Ho Lung, the Missionaries of the Poor in Kingston, Jamaica, taking care of thousands and thousands and thousands of poor people every year. And these are people, as you say, Stephanie, who are looking at it long term. And certainly, as you clearly point out, ours is not a long term society. We're always looking for the quick fix, the short attention span, and all that goes with that.
Right.
Well, we are going to go to the phones here because they are starting to line up. If you are a pro-choicer or identify yourself with that side of the spectrum, we'd love to hear from you. Stephanie can perhaps give you a little bit of light and clarity to where you're coming from. Maybe there's a question that she hasn't heard yet. She'd like to take a crack at it. Give us a call here at Catholic Answers, 1-888-318-7884, 1-888-318-7884. Back in a moment on Catholic Answers Live. It is indeed Catholic Answers Live for a Monday. We're taking your pro-choice questions. If you identify yourself thusly, this is the number to call, 1-888-318-7884. Our expert this hour is Stephanie Gray, and we're going to begin getting on the phones here, and it looks like my computer is frozen. That's what it looks like. I think it was William in Dallas. Did I get that right?
Yes, you did.
Go right ahead, William. You're on Catholic Answers Live with Stephanie.
Hi, William.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having the show. It's always exciting. I'll take that response off the air. It's about abortion that does not result in the death of the child. For example, when a child is aborted and finishes its growing term in either a test tube or a Borg maturation chamber. Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat that last part?
Are you still on, William? William, are you still there? Not good. Not good. Let me see if I can.
Did you catch that, Tom, or no?
Here it is. If a child is aborted from his mother and then is put into a test tube to be saved and grow, does the Catholic Church consider that an abortion?
Oh, I see. Well, maybe instead of a test tube, like perhaps he thinks like an incubator, let's say a woman's, 22 weeks pregnant or so, and we deliver the child and put the baby in an incubator. In a circumstance like that, you can't just induce delivery without having a proportionate reason. So, for example, if it's past viability and you have a life in danger scenario, then you can put the baby in an incubator because it's past viability, and we hope that at least there's a stronger chance of the child surviving. But let's we certainly have to understand that 25 weeks gestation being born versus 35 weeks is going to make a significant difference in the likelihood of the child surviving. But if it's before viability, you can't deliver the child, but you can address if there's a medical problem. You can directly address the medical problem. Let's say if she has a cancerous uterus and her uterus has to be removed, and try to save both lives. And the effect may be that the child not survive. But if someone just doesn't want to be pregnant anymore, let's say at 30 weeks, and they say, "Oh, well, just put the baby in an incubator because I just don't want to be pregnant," that wouldn't be ethical because there still is a risk to the child's life and health by delivering the child that early. Again, unless there's a proportionate reason such as a life in danger scenario and you have to kind of weigh between two lives.
There you go. William, I hope that's helpful for you. Let's go now to Kara in Fort Walton, Florida, listening on FM 103.3. Hey, Kara.
Hey, how are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for calling.
Listen, I guess one of my biggest issues and my question is, why doesn't the church put as much energy into promoting and helping smooth the way to adoption? You always hear the vehement anti-abortion side. Let me preface this by telling you, I'm pro-choice, but my sister, my husband, and my father are all adopted children. And to me, you take all the anger and all of the a lot of the scary out of the argument. If you could make adoptions easier to do, if you could promote them more, because it's that way it's not a shame thing, it's a gift thing. Does that make sense?
So, Kara, are you saying that if adoption was promoted more, that you would be pro-life?
I'm saying I have a fundamental issue with especially rape and incest, and I understand your point of view. I acknowledge it. I just don't necessarily share it because I think it's so difficult for the mothers. But I think if you could promote and enable it and try to get legislation to make adoption easier and faster and more permanent for families, then I think pregnant mothers would be so much more willing to go that route. But there's so many scary and ugly situations with foster care and adopting.
You know what? You raise a good point. I think that's where we need to make an important distinction between foster care and adoption, because indeed you're right that there are a lot of problems with the foster care system, and there are children that can be in very bad homes and kind of bumped from home to home and not given stability and support. But that's very different from adoption. Adoption it needs to be promoted, but adoption doesn't need to be promoted any more than it is to get the children who are infants into adoptive homes. And by that I mean there's a waiting list for people who want to adopt infants. So it's not a matter of people not knowing that they can adopt, but rather it's a matter of a lot of women being unwilling to choose adoption, not because it doesn't exist, but because it's a more difficult choice. So yes, we need to encourage it and promote it, but that's not the problem. It is encouraged and promoted. The problem is people aren't choosing it, and I think it may be because they're confusing adoption with fostering, thinking, oh, the child's going to go into a bad home. But I'm not talking about foster care. I'm talking about adoption. And if a woman would release her child and place her child into the arms of an adoptive couple, at birth, then the child, will go into an adoptive home. But if she's resisting placing the child in an adoptive home and there may be problems that get the ministry involved, then the child may be pushed through the foster care system, in which there are a lot of problems.
Does that make sense, Kara?
Oh, it does. Like I said, I think if you could take the shame away, and I think shame is a hard thing, because especially for a woman who's pregnant, if you can take the shame away and make it a gift that it is, you're halfway there.
So you believe that adoption, Kara, then is a gift?
I do. Like I said, I wouldn't be on the planet were it not for someone adopting my father.
Right.
And I wouldn't get married if somebody had adopted my husband.
Right, exactly.
I wouldn't have a sister.
Yeah. So that's beautiful. I mean, how many people are in your life that are only in your life because of adoption? And just one thing that I'd like to ask you then is if you recognize just how beautiful adoption is and how much you want it to be encouraged. In this case of rape and incest that you mentioned, that you said you would be pro-choice on, why not support adoption in cases of rape and incest so someone else like you can have someone come into their life who's been adopted, namely the child conceived in rape?
again, for me, that's like taking a violent act and really prolong it, because we've already talked about, adoption is a difficult choice to give up a baby. But falling in love or, there's a lot of emotional things that I think are difficult unless you've got a really solid support system to handle that kind of pregnancy. I think it's asking a lot. I do. I admire.
Well, and I could agree with you, Kara, that indeed it. Sorry, what was that?
Asking you to carry your father's baby. That's a lot going on. That's a lot of shame and emotional burden.
Absolutely, and I think it's on that point that you and I can agree, Kara, that it would be so difficult. There aren't words to describe how difficult it would be. But if she has an abortion, is it going to erase the trauma of the incest which occurred?
No, I don't think it would.
And do you think she's going to be reminded for well beyond 9 months, past the abortion, into years beyond the incest itself? Do you think she's going to be reminded of what her father did to her?
I do. It's not like it makes you forget. It doesn't make it, go away. But I think it is a lot, especially in cases of incest. I mean, raising, what if you fall in love with that child in all the wonderful ways, and then you're getting a whole new set of issues as far as now I'm raising my father's baby, and then identifying that child, and having to say that to that child at some point in their life. There's just some difficult things. It's not easy.
And I think, again, the key phrase there is it's not easy. My question for you, though, Kara, is when life gets difficult, does that give us permission to kill innocent children?
I don't think so, no. But like I said, and, on that, until the world gets a lot easier and we get to be better people, I have to kind of, abortion's not something I like.
Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it right there, Kara, and you are so right. These are difficult choices. These are hard choices, and that's why it's so important to have a program like this to talk about some of this stuff. It's Catholic Answers Live. We're going to take a quick break. Don't go away. Yes, indeed. Welcome back. It is open. It is actually a very important day here on Catholic Answers Live. We are taking calls from people who identify themselves as pro-choice. Our guest is Stephanie Gray, and the phone number is 1-888-318-7884. Let's get Angel from Ann Arbor listening on FM 91.3. Hi, Angel.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, Angel.
Hello. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you. Actually, I'm traveling and was flipping through the radio station and came across this, and I am a pro-choice person, and I can be a little controversial on my viewpoint on it. I actually like to be part of this conversation to challenge people, no matter what religion or group that they're from, because I feel like the problem actually starts, I feel like, because to be honest with you, it would be nice if people were not having to do abortions, and I will say that. But in the meantime,
why do you think that?
Just because health-wise, I think it's a dangerous thing, and I also think the psychology behind it, the fact that you even get yourself to the point. I've never had an abortion, but I've known people who have, and I have watched them even afterwards still deal with the trauma or feeling guilty that they had an abortion. I'm pro-choice not because, hey, it's an easy way to eliminate the pregnancy. I'm pro-choice because I already feel we have a population problem in the world as it is. I think we need to be a little bit more mindful about, how many babies we're popping out and how it's affecting our environment and our community. And the other reason is I'm pro-choice is because I think that for a lot of I call it baby popping, is coming from those who are uneducated, from this sort of part of the culture that they're birthing more children who are not educated. So my question is, why don't we, backtrack a little bit even more and focus on how can we teach our children to be more educated so they don't find themselves in a situation where they're pregnant thinking about abortion. And I'm talking from a small age too, because we teach each other, oh, don't, especially girls. Boys, they're like, oh, be a man. But girls were like, oh, don't talk about sex. My daughter was 7 years old, came home with a note from a boy saying, will you have sex with me, yes or no? She showed me that. She didn't understand, and I said, oh, time for us to have a talk. I taught her about sex as like a candy bar. Would you want an open candy bar? She's like, no, that's how you have to look at it. My daughter's now 22, going into her third year in college, no kids.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you raise an important point, Angel, that indeed we do need to get to the root of the problem, which is a great misunderstanding in our culture about our sexuality, what it means to be male and female, and what that intimate act of sexuality is about and is for. But the question I have for you, based on the first point you mentioned with regards to saying that we have a population problem, we could debate the numbers of population. I always like to say, as a Canadian, come to Canada, because a good chunk of our country is half empty, so there's lots of room for people here. But setting that aside, let's just say we had an overpopulation problem. Do you think if the terrorists who attacked the World Trade Center justified it on grounds that they were addressing the population problem by eliminating several thousand people from the world and therefore doing a good thing, what would you say back to them?
Well, that question has come up before. Of course, it's not correct. That's why, for me, it's a delicate subject, because my thing is like, okay, I don't want to talk about the spilled milk. I'd rather try to prevent spilled milk.
Sure, but I'm just saying.
I'd like to have.
Sure, and again, I think it's important that, as I mentioned, that we understand and teach proper healthy sexuality where people really respect their bodies and the bodies of their spouse. But if you wouldn't support the killing of, people in the World Trade Center for reasons of overpopulation, why would you support the killing of preborn children for reasons of overpopulation?
For me personally, because I'm very scientific, I support those who are religious like yourself, where you come from. But I have a different mindset, which I choose not to go into that discussion on air. But I do have my own scientific reasoning behind it. In the first 2 weeks, I have a different perspective because for me, I look at things in a scientific way. But I do respect and honor, where you're coming from. Especially when you start getting into second and third trimester, that's when I'm then become pro-life.
Okay.
First.
Well, that it's certainly encouraging that there is a point before birth at which you would consider yourself pro-life, and I'm encouraged by that. One thing I challenge you to consider is when you talk about it being okay in the first 2 weeks, by the phrase, the statement 2 weeks, you're implying that we've been clocking time starting 2 weeks ago. So aren't we therefore implying when we say 2 weeks have passed that life must have began 2 weeks prior? Otherwise, we wouldn't say it's been 2 weeks. So therefore, aren't you permitting the killing of a 1 or 1.5 week or 2 week old human? And is that acceptable?
Again, like I said, I'm pro-choice. You won't change my mind on that. If we were off air, I would give you a little bit more detail. But out of respect that I know that some people will hear this and just throw up or, something like this, because I watch people, I'm just very strong scientifically on my viewpoint on it. And so therefore, for me, I turn around and point my fingers back at people and say, why don't you teach your daughters to be stronger and to be comfortable with their sexuality so they're not encouraged by the boys to have sex or to find themselves in a situation of being, raped. I'm not saying that they invite it. I've been honestly raped myself, and everyone knows the story. But I'm a very strong survivor of it. And as a matter of fact, I go around and I teach other women and their daughters how to become stronger women, because I really feel that when the woman is allowed to be comfortable with her sexuality and be comfortable with being recognized as a leader in her group, that these sort of things actually go down in numbers, including abortion. The more we make our women submissive and dominant and underneath men, the more you're going to see this happening.
Right. Well, and I think, Angel, first of all, I'm very sorry for, the suffering that you have endured, and I'm encouraged by the fact that you can experience what you've experienced, but try to, from that experience, bring some good by educating other people and helping, women be strong. I think that's really important. And I think what assumedly goes along with the message that you're communicating is that women and men deserve to be loved, not used, and that we are subjects, not objects, that human beings are not the kind of thing which can be used, abused, and thrown out when when you're done with them. But there are things to be respected as being great individuals of great dignity and being unrepeatable. That even if someone's a twin, they nonetheless are unrepeatable and unique from their twin and from everyone else. And so it's in that sense that we would also object to the act of abortion, because it's treating a human in that sense as them being an object instead of a subject, that they're disposable, that they can be thrown out, instead of having that sense of awe and wonder that we expect a man to have towards his wife when it comes to matters of sexuality, to also have that awe and wonder that we humans should have towards our offspring.
Angel, thank you. I'm sorry. She may be gone. Are you still there, Angel?
Oh, I'm here, yes.
Just
one last thought, Angel.
Yeah.
If we're going to have to go to another caller in a moment, but, if I said to you, I support a man's right to take, what would you say back to me?
I'm sorry, I didn't, the man's right to do what?
To take.
Man's right to take, like, sex from me?
No, a man's right to take.
Okay, so now you're talking to a person who thinks from...
Sorry,
it sounds like you want to say what he wants to take, and I have to know the situation. It's hard for me to say yes or no to that. Yeah.
You're right. And that's why I said it that way, because you correctly recognize that for me to say I support a man's right to take is to not finish my sentence. I have to specify what I'm supporting him taking in order to determine whether it's good or bad. And the same is true when we talk about choice. If we say I support a woman's right to choose, we also have to finish our sentence. And we have to say what precisely are we allowing her to choose? And in the case of abortion, the facts of the procedure are that what we're allowing her to choose is to end the life of the youngest of our fellow human beings. So I leave you with that challenge, but thank you so much for calling in, Angel.
Thank you so much, Angel. I might put one more of a postscript there, and that is when Angel mentioned the population problem, she is absolutely right. It is a severe underpopulation problem. We are not replacing ourselves, country after country.
Yeah, so come to Canada.
Well, come to America. We need some help here, too.
Right. And go to Western Europe and go. I mean, really, you're right. There's so much of the world which actually needs population.
Our phone number is 1-888-318-7884, 1-888-318-7884. We're taking calls from pro-choicers today on Catholic Answers Live. Let's go now to Stephen in San Francisco, listening on Immaculate Heart. Hi, Stephen.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Stephen.
Yeah. I'd like to kind of air my view about my feelings about abortion. I think abortion is sickening and disgusting, but I believe in trying to counsel people to get away from it and stay away from it, and to love their babies, for who they are. The only point where I differ with you is that I don't believe it should be a forced thing like the government prohibiting abortion, because that allows the government to think, well, heaven, we have the right to go inside people's bodies and make legislation. And heaven only knows what they'll do with that. Government never stops. They don't know the meaning of no, stop, or subtract.
Okay.
And the situation with governments today is far worse than you could think. Our governments have been bought off by corrupt corporations. So if you're going to say, well, the government's got to prohibit abortion, then these corrupt corporations are going to get their fingers in there. They might make us take vaccines, force us to submit to experiments. Who knows what will happen if you get the government involved in it. I am, however, for ending the funding of abortion. That's definite.
Okay, well,
Stephen. And Stephanie, if you would just hold your thought there. I'm trying to jump in here. We're a little bit late on a break. If you would hold your thought. And Stephen,
sure.
Don't go away. We're just going to put you on hold for just a moment here. We'll come back and answer that question here on Catholic Answers Live. 43 past the hour. We are taking your calls today of the pro-choice variety. If you are a pro-choicer and you want to get your viewpoint out there, we'd love to talk with you at 1-888-318-7884. And by the way, we're going to take this out to the end of the hour, and then Trent Horn from here at Catholic Answers will be around for an additional hour to tackle those questions and probably quite a few more. Now, when we took the break here, we were talking with Stephen in San Francisco. Stephen, tell me if I'm paraphrasing what you were saying. Doesn't the Catholic Church see that the government has no business legislating what a woman can do with her body? Is that a fair recap of what you were stating?
Well, I feel that with this push by the Catholic Church to outlaw abortion, it is in effect legislating inside people's bodies, and that would send a dangerous precedent. Because government never stops when they get a power. They use it to death. That's why we have Prop 13 in California, so they can't raise your taxes sometimes 2 or 3 times a year.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, if I could jump in there and just maybe get a clarification before I comment specifically on your question. You mentioned that you thought abortion was sickening and disgusting, and you actually encouraged people to stay away from it, which I think is fantastic. If I could ask you, why do you find abortion sickening and disgusting?
Well, because I know that there's something wrong with it. I can't put my finger on it somehow, but I know there's something wrong with it. But not everything.
Would you say it kills a child?
Well, I think there's a very strong possibility at the very least. I just know something in my intuition feels like something scratching on a chalkboard when I think of abortion. But,
sure, that it's just not right kind of thing, that intuitive sense of, ugh.
Yeah. But see, the government is not the solution to many wrongs. It's the solution to some of them, a few of them. But they more than often are the problem.
Well, certainly, there are problems with your government, my government in Canada. But let me ask you this. Do you think it is correct for the government to have laws against rape?
Yeah.
And if a man said, but I'm simply doing with my body what I want when I rape a woman, do you think it's reasonable that we would respond back, but what you're doing with your body is harming someone else's body, so the government needs to step in? Would you agree that's a reasonable response?
Well, yeah, I would say so.
Okay. So therefore, since 2 humans can only produce another human, and beings which reproduce sexually begin their lives at fertilization, doesn't it follow that when a woman has an abortion, she's actually laying down her body so that another body can be killed?
Yeah.
So therefore, shouldn't we have the government legislate not about entering someone's body, but dismembering a child's body and have them legislate against that? What do you think?
That's a very difficult question. And I see the government as so untrustworthy, I would say no, because the government just is not trustworthy. But
you didn't say that for rape.
Well,
you didn't say that for rape,
This
Stephen.
is a violation of someone else's body. That's a different story.
Okay, so if abortion violates someone else's body, like rape violates someone else's body, then we could justifiably have the government intervene.
Well, assuming that, but still, the government just can't be trusted inside our bodies. They just can't. There's far more worse the things going on with the government than you know. I can't explain it all over the air, but if you knew what government's really up to and what they're really doing, you would not want them in on it, believe me.
Well, but what I'm trying to get at, Stephen, is that whether the government is involved in a lot of shady behavior or not, you just said to me a few moments ago that when it comes to a matter of rape, where a man is using his body to hurt someone else's body, that you would have this government that you have a lot of concerns about actually step in and make it unlawful to commit rape. So all I'm challenging you to do is be consistent here. That, rightly or wrongly in terms of what the government does on other matters, can't we agree that the government should ban the dismemberment and decapitation of a tiny baby's body?
Well, I don't think it should be beyond like 3 or 4 months. It should definitely not be, because you see, a lot of it is you need to know when the soul enters in, and how does anybody know when the soul enters in? See, this is not that easy a question to answer.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you know that your soul has entered in now?
Well, I'm a viable adult who can think and move around.
Well, what about when you were a baby and you couldn't think or care for yourself?
Well, I have no idea when my soul entered in.
Okay,
I don't know if anybody does.
Okay, so therefore on that point I think there's some validity there, which is that the soul, and when it comes into the body, we can't prove in the way we can prove, let's say, when a body comes into existence.
Yeah.
But it would be, I think, reasonable to conclude that if we have a living body, we likely have a living soul, right? So the question is, when does the body come into existence? When did you, Steve, begin your life making you different genetically from your mother and your father? When would you say science says you began your life?
Well, I would say it's when you're born, because now you're able to move independently, in a small degree, very small.
Okay.
Degree.
So if we take the line at birth, that's different from what you said a few moments ago, which is 3 to 4 months. So now you're drawing the line at 9 months based on the ability to, be more independent. But why should those of us who are strong and independent have a right to kill those who are weak and more dependent?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. It really is. But all I know is the government just cannot be trusted. What they'll do is they'll take this power and say, well, you know what? We can legally force you to take vaccinations. We can prohibit you from taking herbs and make you take pharmaceutical drugs. See, that's the problem when you legislate with the government inside people's bodies.
Again, though, it comes down to, is there another body involved? And I think that's why, you mentioned it's a difficult question.
Yes.
For me to ask, can a strong and independent person end the life of a weak and a dependent person? But maybe it's a difficult question to ask only because we know the answer, but we don't want to admit the answer, because if we know the answer is no, the strong do not have the right to kill the weak, the independent may not kill the dependent, then what that actually means is that has an effect on our position on abortion. If we say no, the strong can't kill the weak, it logically follows that those who are born may not kill those who are preborn. Because you're right, the preborn are different from us in their dependency, their ability to be, strong and viable. But that's only because of how old they are. A newborn child, my newborn niece, Cecilia, who was born just 2 days ago, can't survive without someone caring for her. But it doesn't mean we can kill her because she's needy. And so in the same way, the preborn child dependent on her mother's body is needy. But surely we can't kill her just because she needs us.
Stephen, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate it. I want to remind everybody that we're going to be taking these calls for yet another hour, so keep it here on Catholic Answers Live. Let's take one from Peggy in New Orleans listening on. Peggy, we'll hopefully get Peggy back on. Let's go to Rachel in Columbus listening on St. Gabriel Radio. Hi there, Rachel.
Hello, how are you guys this evening?
Good.
Good.
I was just curious, when does God become pro-life? Because he, according to the Bible, he promoted many genocides in general of both adults and children, everybody on the planet, except for Noah's family, and also in Exodus, he has the angel of death come and murder all the firstborn children, even adults, of Egypt. So when does God become adamantly pro-life?
Well, thanks for your question, Rachel. I think it's important to realize that God is the creator of life, that he is creator and we are creatures. And therefore, as creatures, in our case, human creatures, we submit to his authority. He is the author of life, not us. I think it's important when we look at God's word, we see that God loves human beings so much that unlike other creation, which was merely good, when he created humans, we were very good. And humans were so good in his mind that when we were at risk of eternal damnation with our sins and having to go to hell, He sent his only son so that he would suffer, die, and be raised from the dead so that our sins could be forgiven and we would have the chance to spend eternity with him. So God is so pro-life that he would send his son to suffer, not for dogs or cats, but for the sake of humans. I think it's also important if we look in the scriptures in the Old Testament, we see God speaks clearly about child sacrifice. And he says he abhors it. To abhor something is to hate it. It says that God hates child sacrifice, where people would sacrifice their sons and their daughters to these gods. And what is abortion but the sacrificing of our preborn children, sons and daughters, on the altars of convenience or selfishness or, sexual promiscuity and lust and materialism. So God has been clear about his love for humans, that we're to love the orphan and the widow, and that we're to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And so because abortion violates all of that, it would be important that we follow God's law to love our neighbor, and that's what he teaches, and that's what the pro-life message is consistent with.
Does that make sense, Rachel?
Well, so just because it's God can, God's okay to kill children. So what if he was?
Remember, God is against child sacrifice, and child sacrifice was the killing of children.
Oh, okay. I can see where you're going with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Very good. Hey, Rachel, thank you for your call. Glad you're listening there in Columbus on St. Gabriel Radio. Stephanie Gray, what a fantastic hour and fast-moving this has been. Thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you, Tom. God bless.
And you also. This is a very important program, Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Questions. I would ask all the folks who are still on hold with Stephanie, we couldn't get to your questions, but we're going to carry you over into the next hour. And certainly Trent will be here to answer those questions as well. Hopefully we'll get some more calls on this very important topic as well. 1-888-318-7884. Again, Pro-Life Answers to Pro-Choice Questions. Keep it here on Catholic Answers Live. Don't go away.